I'm going to try to keep this as short as I possibly can, without omitting key details, so just bear with me please. Disclaimer: I was a heavy meth and heroin user from my teens until I was 31. I'm now sober almost 7 years. Around Christmas 2015, my sister gifted me a 1950s Ouija board. After using it in my home, I began feeling watched. Items would move or vanish, and a dark presence loomed. That summer, I developed MRSA and sepsis, landing me in the ICU for a month. While drugs were the clear cause, it felt like something evil was shadowing me. After recovering, I stayed clean for a year and a half, and my sister and I got a house together. One day, she, another sister, and I used the Ouija board in our backyard, trying to contact our late mother. The board responded that we weren't speaking to her, but to someone or something named Viscous. A crow watched from a dead tree the entire session. The next morning at 4 a.m., a loud crash woke me. The tree had fallen through our fence, landing inches from my bedroom window. From then on, my sister and I suffered intense sleep paralysis and an overwhelming feeling of being watched. One morning, I saw what I thought was my sister crawling on my bedroom floor, but when I checked, no one was there. Later, another sister and I took the board to a Civil War era cemetery, Chapel of the Cross. As we set up, an intense fog rolled in, our candles blew out, and a heavy, oppressive energy overwhelmed us. We fled, but for the rest of the night, I felt dazed, exhausted, and as if something had tried to take over me. By early 2018, I relapsed into heavy drug use. My sister and I separated, and in July, my best friend and I used the Ouija board at my apartment. The board spelled no H, which we took to mean no heroin. The next night, at her house, along with another girl, I felt absolutely awful, like I was dying, but still prepared a big old shot of heroin and meth. Immediately, something went very wrong. I began speaking in a very deep, unintelligible, non-English sounding voice, alternating between that and my normal voice and language, pleading for help. My friends were terrified as I screamed in an unnatural, demonic voice for hours. They eventually locked themselves in another room, while I finally passed out. The next morning, they were distant, and were acting as if I had done something wrong. Later that day, I decided I wanted to go back to my house, so I left, got pulled over, and was arrested for drug possession. By late 2018, I was in a Christian-based rehab, which I initially despised. Over time, I began to accept the program, exploring belief in God. One night, lying in bed but fully awake, I felt a tap on my leg. I turned and saw what I can only describe as a tall, terrifying female-like demon with a long face and sharp teeth. If you've ever seen the movie The Devil's Advocate, that's pretty much what it looked like. I screamed bloody murder, waking the entire house. I jumped down from my bed and ran from the room in tears, shaking uncontrollably. I had to be consoled by my friends for hours. When I was finally able to get back in my bed, I held a cross in my hand all night. After that, I've never had another experience like that. Since then, I've felt free. While I explored Christianity for a while, I now believe in God, but also in other spiritual aspects, and I've been sober for nearly 7 years. I wonder, were these drug-induced hallucinations manifestations of my subconscious? Or real dark entities, demons, or something else? I believe drugs can open people up to negative forces and increase the chance of evil entities. I'd love to hear others' thoughts. When I was a kid, I had an experience that, as I got older, I attributed to sleep paralysis or something like that, but I'm not entirely sure. So this one night, I was having trouble sleeping, and I went to my parents' room to ask if I could sleep in their bed. They agreed, and I laid in between them. They had this big wooden beam that crossed over above their bed. So anyway, I looked up, and sitting on the beam was this small creature. At the time, I called it a gremlin because I didn't know how else to describe it. It stood on two legs and was the same size and shape of an owl. It was wearing what I can only describe as a Grim Reaper cloak and hood. Nothing about this thing was visible except the cloak and hood. I couldn't see a face or any body parts, but I could tell that it was standing up. It stood on the beam directly above me and felt like it was staring at me. Eventually, I gained the courage to pull the blanket over my head, and I lay awake for hours. And when I did finally fall asleep, I woke up and nothing was there. I checked around everything in the room to see if there was anything that could have looked like it was on the beam, but there was absolutely nothing that could have explained it. When I was about 5 or 6, I used to see these very tall, humanoid creatures stalking me, either in my doorway, my window, and sometimes peering down from the top of my bunk bed. These creatures looked to be about 8 feet tall. They were completely head to toe pitch black, like a void, with nothing but 2 white eyes. I don't know if it was just some type of mild schizophrenia or my screwed up imagination. I rarely see them anymore, but I have had a couple of occurrences in the past 8 months. Also, this isn't sleep paralysis. I can move freely whenever I see them. One thing I forgot to add, there was one time that it made noise. It was loudly chanting, "Don't do that," in a distorted voice, and after about 5 minutes, it just disappeared. Am I insane? One day, about 6 years ago, I was coming home from school. Now, my routine had always been to drop my bag off in my room and go outside. The way my hallway is set up, at the end of the hallway is my brother's room, and just to the left is mine. On this particular day, my brother had left his door open. So, as I go to drop my bag off, I look inside my brother's room. I see 2 transparent people, an older man and older woman, who were talking to this creature. It was essentially this really tall skeleton. It had pitch black skin that was stretched tight over its bones. It looked like it was wearing a white mask and had these huge, bloodshot eyes and a big, almost too big, forced smile. I froze and was absolutely terrified. They all turned to look at me at the same time and just faded away. A couple of days later, I woke up in the middle of the night, feeling like I was being watched. I looked up, and saw this creature standing at the foot of my bed. Its head was almost touching the ceiling. I looked him up and down and just said, "Nah, fuck that," and just rolled over. I know it wasn't sleep paralysis because I distinctly remember rolling over. I never saw it again. When I was around 12, my friend and I saw something that I couldn't explain. If someone else told me they saw this, I wouldn't believe them, but since I was there, I know it happened. The house I grew up in was on the corner of a city street. The way the house was situated, from my bedroom window looking out, you could see the street and the entire side of the house across from us. A guy friend of mine lived on the second floor of that house, and him and his family were gone for the weekend. My friend and I were in my room playing Nintendo, and I was sitting on my bed facing the window. It was evening, but it couldn't have been later than 6 or 7, because my friend wasn't allowed to be over too late. It was her turn playing, and I'm watching the screen, but something catches my eye, and I look out my window and see something in the house across the street. The one who belongs to my friend, who was gone for the weekend. I kid you not. It looked like what you would describe a Yeti to be. It was white, as tall as the ceiling, and covered in fur. I frantically told my friend to look, and she paused the game and immediately saw the same thing. We got down on the floor and crawled to my window to watch it. It was destroying the house, like breaking chairs, breaking dishes, ripping up the sofa, etc. I remember asking my friend if she was seeing what I was seeing, and she confirmed that she was. We watched this thing for a few minutes, and then kinda started diverting our attention to each other in like an oh my god, what the fuck kind of way. And when we eventually looked back, it was gone. We both kind of instinctively knew that this was something that should stay between us. It wasn't discussed, but the vibe was there. In order to get home, she would have had to walk past that house, so she had her dad come and pick her up. I tried my best to sleep, but I kept waking up and looking out to see if I saw it again, but I didn't. The next day, I was sitting outside of my house, waiting for my friend who lived in that house to come home. I felt like I needed to be there when they eventually came running out of their destroyed home, so I could try to explain what we saw the night before. They pulled up sometime in the afternoon, and I hid behind my door, nervously. Like, I knew it was going to be bad, and I was scared to be a part of it. I watch them go inside, and I wait, and wait, and nothing. Eventually, the friend and his dad come out to get luggage from the car, and look as nonchalant as can be. At this point, I'm confused. The house was destroyed. We saw it happen. I go across the street to my friend, and he greets me. I'm kinda like, what's up? Is everything cool? And he starts talking to me about something, and it hits me that the house is fine. Everything was as they left it. At this point, I'm so confused because I know what I saw, and I had a witness. Later on, the friend who witnessed this event and I talk, and neither of us can understand what the fuck happened. But life kinda just moves on. It wasn't until I was an adult, and I read about so-called glitches in the Matrix, that I started to think that might be an explanation for what I saw. Some poor prehistoric creature got whirled into a house, freaked the fuck out, and then glitched back, returning everything to its normal state. I mean, yeah, it sounds fucking crazy, but I racked my brain for decades trying to come up with something more based in reality, and I can't land on anything. I've only told 2 people what we saw that night. My mom and my husband. Neither outright say I'm lying, because they know me and know I'm not someone who tells stories. But they don't seem to enthusiastically believe me either. I get it. They probably think I saw something that they can logically explain. But I swear, unless you saw it, it's impossible to know how real it was.